I'm Vanessa. Welcome back to the Selena Global Living Podcast, where we cover real stories, real estate, and the realities of life abroad. One of the things I love about doing this work of helping people find their place in the world, is watching somebody experience a place and realize that they've found home. There's just nothing better than watching somebody connect with a place that feels good in their bones. You can do all the research, you can watch all the videos, you can listen to all the experts, but you really don't know until you're there. And as someone who has lived in 4 countries and moved 10 times in 10 years, I know that feeling too, and it's magical. Today, I'm talking to Erica Wright. And she's an American who found her way to Mexico with her husband, and she's still settling into her new life in Mexico. And this is such a beautiful story of somebody who knew that she wanted to leave, had talked about it for a long time, and then finally pulled the trigger and made it happen, and now is experiencing life in a place that feels like home. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Erica. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I know that you have been super busy the last few months packing and organizing and moving, and you've basically just landed. So I really appreciate you being willing to talk to me now while the transition is still so fresh. But I wanted to capture your thought process and your kind of your experience while it's all still really fresh in your mind. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, when did the idea of leaving the US shift from a someday idea to okay, we're doing this now?
So, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while. It's since I started dating my now husband. We've been together for about 6 years now, and we've been always like, we're going to move. We're not staying in PA. We just didn't know where. And then it was July of 2024, exactly last year, from when we moved. We were in Jamaica, and we were talking to my cousins who had essentially did the same exact move. They moved from California to Mexico, and it's funny because our parallels are very similar. His wife, who's my cousin-in-law, essentially, we're very much alike. So she'd done all the research between Costa Rica and Mexico, and then she came up with Mexico, and but it was a different place in Mexico that I hadn't heard of. So she told us all about it. I did a lot of research, and then I had to come down to Cancun for work in October. So I was like, well, this is, you know, I look for signs. And then it would just like, okay, well, Mexico is calling me. So, I came down here for a work trip, but I made it an exploration trip. So I came down here to explore Merida, the culture, the people, and I fell in love with it. So I was like, we are doing this. I don't know how, but we are doing this. I actually had a realtor. We were looking at properties. We were, I think I saw 30 homes at that point. And after all that, we didn't even sign on a property. I ended up signing a property the day I was flying back to the United States without even looking at the property we ended up buying. Um,
No way,
so
brave girl.
So it took, it was a lot of trust, and I can't do this someday because I never know when someday's going to happen. I'm going to do this now. So, my boyfriend at the time, but my now husband trusted me a lot to take care of this. And he didn't really ask a lot of questions. He just wanted to make sure he had a pool.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, let you run with it. So what were some of your criteria? Obviously you did a lot of research, you're
Yeah.
comparing Costa Rica. So what were your key criteria?
When finding a location to move to.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, it was really the ability to be able to go back and forth, still be able to be close to home. So, originally, when I moved back from England, I had never planned to stay in the States for very much long. I had originally planned to go to Australia. Um, and that's on the other side of the world, right? So traveling home is a distance, and it does take a lot out of you. So we were looking for something that was still close to home, that had warmer climates because we love to be outside. And then we wanted something that was affordable. Because he actually lived in California for a while, and he wanted to move there. And I was like, no, 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 no. That's not a place to retire. I was like, I'm not going to spend all my money. I'm going moving to a place and then having to still work. The goal was to find somewhere where we could retire, enjoy ourselves, be by the beach, and be able to be comfortable.
What are the things about Merida that really stood out to you that made you feel like, okay, this is it?
So the first thing was the people. I mean, you're coming to another country where you don't, the language is a barrier for one, speaking English to Spanish, and then just feeling comfortable. I'm not new to moving to a new country. I lived in London, I lived in Scotland, I lived all over. So for me, it's normal, but being able to be comfortable there and not feel lonely is going to be key because a lot of people leave, after a year or 6 months because they feel isolated. And for me, community was going to be the big thing to move here and be comfortable here and safety too. So there is a huge community here of people, local expats that get together once a month, and we actually have a WhatsApp group. And so I mean, there's complete outreach all the time. They're like, I need a plumber, I need this housekeeper, I need this, I need that, I need a ride here. There's a whole outreach of hundreds of people that are there to support you. So that was a big positive. I was like, I don't feel like I'm leaving home because I still have this community here to help me and lean on. And then safety was a big one. When I came down here, I mean, there's police everywhere. That's probably in the last 5 years has been, two big murders. It's not a crime isn't a big thing here in Merida because they do take care of that police force. And, some people say it's because this is the cartel's safe zone. I don't know if that's true or not, but you don't have to worry as much about your neighbors or what's going on. So I do feel safe and comfortable here. Jeff goes out and walks into the local neighborhood, and that's about a mile from our home, and he's comfortable as well.
Okay. Yeah, whenever I talk about Mexico, the comments are just filled with, "Oh my god, Mexico's so dangerous. You're all gonna get murdered. They're lying to you. It's terrible there." What kind of pushback did you get from your friends in the States when you told them you were moving to Mexico? Were they, worried
The
for
first
you?
question is why Mexico? you know, so, people are like, is it safe? Are you going to be okay? And especially Jeff's parents, they're just like, they've never been anywhere. They were just like very concerned about our safety. And we live in a Pravada. So, I mean, we have a security guard for Jeff. And so it's not, we live in the middle of nowhere. So I feel very safe where I am and I don't have to worry about it. Our neighbors are very vigilant. They're actually from Venezuela. So they actually have like wires around their house too, because they're used to a more dangerous area than where we live now. But yeah, the first question most people was like, "Why Mexico? What made you move there? Or what was the decision?" My parents are used to me doing these things, so they didn't really ask questions. But my friends did deaf. So why Mexico? Are you going to be safe? That was the first number one.
Yeah. Jen from Expat, who I need to connect you to, lives in Merida, and she said that just you have to look at the statistics, right? You can't just look at the headlines. And where she lived in, I think in Atlanta, the murder rate was some ungodly exponential number more. I'll put it on the screen. I don't remember what it is right now, but I
I'm
mean,
from
if you
Philadelphia,
compared,
and it's
yeah,
looking at the two. It's like, well, yeah, I'm safer here.
yeah, isn't that wild, right? The perception versus reality, I guess. So let's talk visa paths. How did you guys figure out how to move to Mexico?
So, for us, I will have to say the Philadelphia consulate is probably from what I've heard, all the stories that I've heard, it's probably the easiest. I literally, after talking to my cousins in July, I went online, I looked up the Philadelphia consulate, I sent an email out and said, "What do I need to do to apply for temporary residency?" The guy replied back to me very quickly, and he said, "Here's the form." It was like 2 pages. I filled out the form, and he was like, "We'll schedule an interview. Once you send all the paperwork." So it was a 2-page form, and then I had to submit my bank statements, for the last 6 months, proving that I had enough income into my account in order to move there for temporary residency. And I think at the time it was, I believe, 4,000 US dollars per month that I needed. They've raised it since then, and they keep going back and forth. But that's all I needed to show, and then I had that I was employed or for the type of visa that I actually went through with. Um, they just want to see income. So they want to make sure that you can move here and that you have stability to move here. So I did that. I went to the Philadelphia consulate. Once I got the interview, they basically looked over my paperwork again. They stamped my passport with my visa, my temporary visa. And then at that point, I had at least 60 days to go into Mexico. Well, once I entered Mexico, I had 60 days to actually apply for the second step. And at that point, I would have to go to the immigration center and Merida. At that time, I was in Progreso, and complete the process. And they call that the kanji process or conning process. So I did that, and it literally I got that done in July. I got my approval in beginning of August. my trip was October, so I just waited until my trip because I wanted to do everything at the same time. And by the end of October, I had my temporary visa. It was very quick and simple for me. I know some people have a little bit more complications, and then mine's actually expired. Well, it expires at the end of October because it was a 1 year temporary visa, and I just renewed it last week for my 3 years. So now I have a 3 year temporary visa. And what we did at the time, I wasn't married to my husband, but I guess you could do this in any situation, is after I had my temporary visa, what I did is I applied for a spousal unification. So he didn't have to show income because he's self employed and he doesn't have that $4,000 US income that I do. And so he is depending on me. Um, so what we did is we had a spousal unification. He went to the same process. All he had to do was go to the interview. They approved him, and now his visa essentially follows my visa. And we used a lawyer for the Mexico part. The US part I did myself. But once we got into Mexico and the paperwork, I used a company, and they've been really great. They did my visa. They actually helped me look over the paperwork for my house. I mean, I can read Spanish, but it's a lot of legal documents. So I had them review the documents, and they do this process all the time with visas, and they know the people there. So it just made the process faster and easier, and I didn't have to think about it. There was also changes I had to change my address, had to change my marriage status, and they did all that for me. So that was pretty helpful.
Okay, seems relatively smooth. I mean, as long as you can show some income, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you said you want to retire. Are you still working now or have you switched over to the retirement lifestyle?
So I work remotely for a real estate company, and I've always kind of worked remotely at home. So I was like, it makes sense. I can work wherever. So I've leveraged some of my duties that were in house to, what I had to do before I left was hire someone and replace myself, essentially before I left. And I did that. And then I came here and, now I'm working on a different part of the business. But the goal is to kind of, slowly step out of that and then really focus on my nonprofit that I have and be able to consult and coach people who want to do the same thing that I did as well. And that's really my goal at the end of this.
All right. Sounds like a really solid plan that you've been very methodical and you've just been putting it into action. I'd love for you to paint a picture for people of the difference, like the cost of living difference. So let's take that $4,000 in the United States. Kind of we know kind of what that looks like in Philadelphia. So what does that translate to as terms of a lifestyle in your part of Mexico?
Well, if there are Mexicans looking inward, they would say you're very rich because, they live very simple here. I mean, people sleep in hammocks, they don't sleep in beds. Like, there's not doors or windows. And like, if you're really in Mexico, that's how they simply live, and they live in a smaller place. I mean, our house is very, American, so to speak, because it is, we have a 4 bedroom, 5 bath house with a pool, and that's not very normal for, what most people live like in Mexico. So, it will cover you plus the expenses. Most people that come here who are expats have a nanny, they have a cook, they have a cleaner, but you can afford those things because you're making the income from the US that's paying, these people's salaries. And I mean, my cleaner comes once a week, and her whole monthly salary that I pay her is equivalent to what I used to pay my cleaner to come once a month at my house in the US. So that's the difference. You're paying for these services, but you can't afford those services now because you're, making that US dollar and living in Mexico.
Yeah. What adjustments have you had to make to your routines or habits or hobbies since moving to Mexico?
So, I mean, because I'm still working remotely, I'm living on a different time zone. I mean, essentially, it's not that bad right now. It's a 2 hour time difference. And in October, it'll be a 1 hour time difference. So I do wake up earlier. I get up with my cat at 4:30 in the morning, and, I work out and I, make breakfast, clean the house. That's something I didn't do before in the States is, I did have a cleaner, but now I do tidy up more just because living in a tropical climate, you get more dust, there's more bugs. And so there's just more things to be aware of. So, I do try to dust around the house more often. I'm pouring hot water down the sink to make sure there's no bugs coming out. We
Yeah.
keep all the drain covers covered. So there's, different adjustments in that sense of life. We don't flush our toilet paper. It's a lot of different things that, that we're putting into our behavior that we didn't do back in the States. So that's a big a tradition for me. Different. We don't have a car here yet. So that's a transition for us because obviously we came from having 3 cars to no cars. So, we do Uber. So, but we're not as flexible to be able to, hey, let's get in the car and let's go here or there. Because we got to think about, okay, we're buying Uber. Well, how much is that going to be? What do we have to go to other places? Let's try to, plan it around that time and do everything all at that one time. So it's kind of juggling that. And then, obviously, the social network. So, I do have that community that where I can reach out to, but just creating a new friend group. That's a transition as well. And I am making starting that now, but that's something new. And then making friends when you're older adults, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you're not anchored around school or
Yeah,
work because you're working remotely or, like a church group or something like that. You have to just make the effort to get out in the community. But, I find I've lived in multiple countries too, and I found that the international community is always so helpful and so willing to, like, welcome new people in because I think if you move to another city in the United States and people have known the same people since they were kids, they don't need new friends. They're good, you'll get in, but it could take a lot longer. But I feel like every time I move to a new country, people are like they're curious about you. They want to know why you're here and what you're about and to see if maybe you guys will jive. And there just seems to be a lot more openness and really happiness to help people find the dentist, find the plumber, recommend the housekeeper, and all of that. I really do feel like you get out what you put into it. And so when
for
you
sure.
join the groups and you ask questions and you join the meetup coffees and whatever, it is you could really can find your people. I also love, and tell me if you feel this too, like when people consciously choose to live in a place, you already have this
The
common
same.
there's this like set of values or this alignment, right? Because you could all have all left and gone somewhere else. You could be in Puerto Vallarta or Costa Rica. You chose there, which means there's something about that place that you guys all already kind of agree on. Doesn't mean you're gonna like all of them, but there's always gonna be someone, but you have this commonality. And so are there any new hobbies or skills or anything that you're kind of exploring now that you have this new life?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really big into salsa dancing and dancing in general. And when I lived in Miami, I did a lot of it. And then I stopped, when I went to England, I kind of did a little bit. I was like, one thing that I'm going to do for myself when I move back here is go get back into dancing and do it for myself, just for fun. I know how to dance also, but I'm just going to take classes and enjoy myself and be around other people who enjoy the same thing. So I take classes on Saturday for an hour and a half, and that's my time to just really enjoy the music and to make friends. And actually, that's how I ended up making friends. Is from the salsa fest. Again, we both love travel and we both love to dance. So already have 2 things in common.
Yeah.
So, that's for me and that's what I've been doing. And then, now we as a family, we go to the beach every month and just kind of, enjoy ourselves and relax there because that was one of our goals as well too.
Nice. What would you say are some of the trade-offs, things that are harder now that you live in Mexico versus in the US, and some things that are maybe easier or better that you wouldn't give up now that you've had the chance to experience them?
Well, I mean, the first one obviously is not being with my family. Family is very important to me and, the reason why I do everything I do, but they know and for me to be happy, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be in PA. And that they knew that. I'm grateful that they're allowing me to have my journey and to travel and to be here. So that's hard, just when my parents are older, they're almost in their 80s, they're aging, and how can I help them? And they tell me this is happening or they need help with this and I'm not there. So, it does break my heart sometimes when I have those conversations. So that's a big trade-off for me. Healthcare here, it's crazy cheap. And I'm never going back to US healthcare.
Let's talk about this because people have this perception that we have better healthcare because we pay a lot for it. Let's talk about that.
That's not I mean, talking to some of the doctors here, like they're continually educating themselves, they're going on trips, they're, going to conferences. These people are highly educated and they're, from all over, they're not just from Mexico. So, people have the perception that you're going to get less, you're actually getting better. Essentially, I mean, these people are experienced and they know what they're doing. And, and so I feel very comfortable with, the people that I've met who take care of us. We had incident where we had to come to the dentist a week after we got here. We've already just dived into that. These people have the experience and they have the knowledge, and it is cheap. We went there and it was like $25. I was like, okay, if I was in the States, that would have cost me probably $500. So just because it costs more doesn't mean that it's better.
Yeah, and the equipment and the technology and all of that can be even better and easier to access, I feel like, in some of these
Right.
places. And I've heard
There's
sorry, go ahead.
there are certain things that they're doing that the U.S. isn't doing because of red tape or politics. So it's just changing your perspective on it for sure.
I've also heard in Mexico in particular that doctors will, like, give you their personal number or they will personally
Yes,
call you to check
yes.
in, and it's
So
much more like family doctor.
you have WhatsApp and you can just talk to them anytime and they'll show up anytime at your house. You know,
That's amazing.
my doctor isn't making house calls in the US unless I paid them a lot of money, but this is what they do on a normal. They will show up at your house if you're sick and take care of you. So
Amazing.
that's pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get that.
No, no way. Talk to me about the food. Are you feeling you're getting healthier food? What's the quality like? How's that going?
That's such an interesting story because we talk about this all the time in our house because we actually go to a farmer for our meat. We don't basic things we get from the grocery store. But there's a local farmer who supplies us our meat, and there's a local farmer that supplies us like our greens and our herbs and vegetables and things like that. So we cooked meat the other day, and we're like, my family's from Jamaica, and my aunt and uncle were here, and we're like, we noticed that the chicken's a little tough, and they were like, yeah, when chicken is raised in a farm, it tends to be a little tougher, so you have to cook it a little longer. It doesn't have the stuff that's injected into it like they do in the states, and so things are usually leaner, smaller, and the cuts are smaller too. So that's what some of the things that we've noticed is that the meat cuts that we get are way smaller because the animals are leaner, but it's healthier for us. And I've noticed that I felt more health. My husband's felt more healthy ever since we moved here on what we eat. Eating similar things, but the product itself is just healthier.
Yeah, and the access to really good fruit. Oh my gosh, the fruit in Mexico. I lived in Costa Rica, and I imagine it's about the same. But those little bananas and the little tiny
Yes, I have
pineapples,
in apple
oh,
bananas. Yeah,
they're
yeah,
so
I
good.
get them from my farmer.
I miss those. I do miss that a lot. Oh my gosh. Well, as we wrap up, I'd love for you to speak to the person who keeps saying, I want to leave, I'm ready to go, but can't seem to like get over that hump. What's one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is feeling stuck and they want to get unstuck and move forward?
I mean, I always say just you got to take action. What's your first step? And take that action. You got to make some type of movement in order to move forward. And, what's your pain point? What's really your why and why you want to do this? And you got to question every day. Like, I'm getting up in the morning. I'm like, what am I working for? Is this what it is going to look like every day? How do you, that helps you move and take that step? Because for me, I was just like, I'm not gonna be in PA anymore. Like, this is ridiculous. I can't do another winter. I literally said to myself, I cannot do another winter. I will not do another winter. What needs to change? So I was like, okay, let's make this up. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, but let's start somewhere. And that was my pain point. I was like, no more winters. And that was literally it. That's what I said to myself every week. I was like, I cannot do another winter. That was my why. It was big enough for me to make the momentum to move forward, and I was like, I would get out and I would have to take snow off my car. And I was like, nope, not doing this anymore. I was like, so what do I need to do? And that was big enough to push me to make the step to move forward and make the change. Again, what's your why and what's the step that you're going to take to move you one step forward? It doesn't have to be massive, just one step to move you forward to that hit that.
Yep, one step in front of the other. I always say you will leave when the pain of staying is worse than the pain of leaving. And until that pain hits, you won't put up with the pain of leaving because it's hard. I mean, it's a lot of steps and it's expensive and there's a lot of sacrifice, but it is worth it to live in a place where you feel like it's home, where you feel good. It's worth it, but
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
hard.
we downsized our house, which was hard, consolidating everything into 6 suitcases, and that's all we took. We didn't have to take a moving van, so that was very hard. Just kinda emotionally getting rid of everything and, so that was a step in the process, and then just figuring out, how are we gonna do this? What does this look like? But, it's just taking it bit by bit. And, one thing that I always say to myself is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's how I take everything. And that's how I approach everything in my life is one bite at a time. And that's all we did. But yeah, it can be an emotional process. It's very challenging. I would just say, making sure that you have support, and I reached out a lot. That's literally what I would do every night. I would be on my phone for an hour in the groups and the chats, and asking questions. What about this? What about this? What about this? And it's funny because when my aunt came to visit me, she was my first visitor after we moved here, and she's like, "You're really set up here," and it was just because I did a lot of research. But you can't do analysis paralysis. You gotta make that move. And, I got water filtration system in my house. I have solar panels. We're pretty set up, so we're pretty self sufficient here. But it was just making sure I made the steps to move forward and get where we wanted to go.
What a great place for us to end. One step at a time. Just keep pushing forward. You'll make it happen. You put your attention on it and that roadblock, you'll find a way over, under it, or through it. You just have to keep pushing. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. It was so great to connect with you. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The first step to figuring out where in the world you want to live is to take the Expatsy test, and I'll include the link in the description. Expatsy helps Americans figure out where in the world they want to live. And no, this is not sponsored. I just collaborate with them when they are helping people move to Spain. But start there. That will help you narrow down the countries that are likely a good fit and where you may be able to find a visa path to go there. And then once you've done your research, maybe visited a few places, and you've narrowed your list, you need to speak to three important experts. First, you need to talk to a visa attorney and make sure that you do have a path to move there. Second, you need to talk to a tax advisor in that country who works with Americans to understand how your tax profile or tax obligations will change once you move, given your situation. Do not just trust online research. Talk to an expert. And then finally, you need to speak to a financial planner because once you leave the country, some institutions in the United States won't let you call and make trades. You may have to move some things around. The way you save money and save for retirement or spend your retirement savings may need to be adjusted. So these are three really important conversations to have before you put in your 2 weeks notice or start selling things. Start there. Then you need to find a trusted real estate expert in the local market where you're going to move. Whether you're looking to rent or buy, you need somebody who speaks the local language and English and is well connected in that area. The way we do real estate in the United States is very different from how real estate is conducted in many other parts of the world. And you are going to feel like a fish out of water. When you decide where you want to live, contact me. I have incredible, well vetted real estate experts in my network in multiple countries. And I can personally connect you at no cost to you to a real estate agent who can help you find your place, whether that's to rent or buy. Until then, keep traveling, keep exploring, and keep living the life you dream about.